So subjective probability. Subjective probability is pretty much made up. So for example, if I say, so that thing I had before when I said what is the probability of rain? That's not a good idea. There's actually some science behind that, right? So let's say I said what's the probability of there being a snow day in March. And let's say it's just me and I don't really have the data, so I'm going to say, okay, it's 22%. Where did that number come from? I just made it up. And that's essentially subjective probability. It's essentially something that I feel is right. Or, someone says, what's the probability that you're going to be, that this relationship that you're in is going to last a year? You say, I don't know, about 33%. Well, maybe you wouldn't do that, but some people do that. That would be a subjective probability. And we're not going to talk about that very much because not so interesting. The next thing, let's talk about the complement. So let's go back to the other example. Let's say I say that the probability of having a snow day in March. And we'll say that we'll stick with the 22%. So let's assume that this is true. So we're out of subjective probability. We're now into something else. So the probability of a snow day in March is 22%. And what I want to know is, what is the probability of not having a snow day in March? This got pretty big. So if there's a 22% probability of having a snow day in March, what's the probability of not having a snow day in March? And that would just be, we know that if it's not this, it's that. So it's going to be 100% minus that. It's going to be 78%. Or, to write it in another way, that's kind of maybe a formula type thing. The probability of A is 1 minus the probability of not A, 1 being 100%. Or, to put it another way, the probability of something good happening is the total minus stuff that you don't want. It's just indirect in another way. So as an example, if I said, what's the probability of not rolling a 4 if you're rolling a 1d6? So I want to know the probability of not rolling a 4. Well, that would be 1 minus the probability of rolling a 4, which is 1 minus 1 over 6, which is 5 over 6. Ooh, one thing about fractions, if you use fractions, you have to reduce them, right? If you have an answer of 10 over 12, you have to make that 5 over 6. So fractions have to be reduced. That's complement. That's the end of the introduction.